Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel, and in this video we conclude our Dark Zones adventure with a full sort of vlog run through all the details and so on of the Warhammer weekend just gone. So the weekend of the 29th and 30th of September was the event, and yeah, had no idea what to expect really. This is the new events team at Warhammerworld, so some of the old names have moved on to Warhammer TV, to rules writing and so on. So a different crew to what I'm normally used to playing up there with, but very similar format, and I'm going to run through all of that in the video for you. So let's get straight onto it. So for those of you that don't know, campaign weekends work very differently to competitive grand tournaments or any ITC other events. A lot of those tournament events and competitive play gets televised quite a lot or streamed quite a lot on Twitch and on YouTube. This is a very different format. So if you've never played a campaign and you're not very competitive, i.e. you want to run something a bit more thematic, these are the kind of weekends for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some pictures of some of the weird differences that you will see in a campaign event. So campaign events are set to a story, and depending how each faction participates within that story evolves and drives the results. And some of those games you will get bonuses, some of them you'll get negatives, some may seem a little bit unfair or a little bit harsh, but that's the nature of a narrative based event. So there was 7 games in total. One was played on the Friday night but had no real impact. It was kind of setting the scene, allowed people to play a much bigger game. So I think they were doing up to about 3,000 points on the Friday night. I didn't participate in that. I didn't have 3,000 points with me to start with, and we were running a bit late. We played during the day, wanted to look around the museum and just sort of hang out with a few friends that we were just catching up. So we went for dinner and a few drinks instead. And Saturday and Sunday was when we played our 6 games. So the Saturday morning started off with 2 500-point games. Saturday afternoon and Sunday were 4 1750-point games, so 2 in the afternoon and 2 in the morning as the escalation of the event transpired really. So started off with sort of small patrol games, and then we sort of built up into some of the larger events as the story unfolded. So this was the first of the Tenebris system campaigns I'd been to. There have been 2 before that, and there are 3 factions vying over the Tenebris system. So you had the forces of Chaos, the forces of the Imperium, and then the forces of the Invaders, which represents pretty much all the Xenos players. So in the previous 2 events, both Chaos and the Invaders had won, and the Imperium had not. So it's going to be swinging balance going on with the system. So basically, it's like a planet zone. There's some secret stuff going on, which kind of evolved during the story, and we'll get to some of that story as we go through each of the games. So the Dark Zones represent in this system an uncontrolled area of the system. So there were several planets involved, and those planets were of a different kind of form, and that was represented by some various shenanigans going on with a random dice roll at the start of each game, which could adjust the way that the game slightly played. And then each of the forces and factions were put up on the big screen to see which table you were going to go to, and this was your patrolling army, your first foray into this uncontrolled area of the systems and planets around, trying to get your sort of your bearings and your footfalls, and just trying to establish a small landing base ready for the larger invasion forces that are going to follow on. So yeah, it was sort of 2 back-to-back 500 points, all contributing to this kind of scouting kind of idea, just trying to get to grips with what's going on within the Dark Zones as part of the narrative. And as I said, each of these games was going to be impacted in some kind of way due to the weirdness of the areas that we were playing in. So what were these vagaries specifically? So if you, as I said, you rolled a d6. On a 1, any model without the fly keyword, if it advanced or assaulted through any kind of ruin, it would suffer a mortal wound on a roll of a 1. On that d6 roll of 2, no unit could take advantage of any kind of cover. On a roll of a 3, we had a smoking ruin, which meant that pretty much everything had collapsed, and that blocked all line of sight through any kind of terrain. On a roll of a 4 on that though, every model would gain +1 attack but -1 leadership. On a roll of a 5, you'd have a d6 roll off between the 2 of you, and the winner would pick whether it be 1 through 4. On a roll of a 6 though, you'd roll 2 dice on this table and ignore and re-roll 5s and 6s, so you would have 2 of those results stacking during the game. So as you can imagine, some of these are going to benefit certain armies and some of which are not going to benefit armies. So things like +1 attack, imagine that on an orc or a horde army, that's going to be disgusting. But if you've got giant knights and so on, that terrain blocking stuff might be really beneficial depending on how high those buildings were. You might actually get to block line of sight to your knights, which would be quite handy for those. On the most part, that probably wouldn't affect them so much. They might prefer the +1 attack, especially when it comes to Stomp, for example, where you're going to end up rolling a whole bucket of dice. So these are the kind of things that really set apart campaign events, right? So you're battling over systems. Those systems have different planetfalls. Those planets have different impacts to the way that the playstyle is going to work with your games. So let's talk about the level of effort in preparation for an event like this. If you haven't seen my Road to Dark Zone series, then please go and check that out. I'll leave all the appropriate links and cards in the video for you to go and do that, so you can see my road to the Dark Zones campaign forces progress with my Thousand Sons and Tzeentch Demons. But on arrival and registration, we were given a pack. Here is that pack. So you can see Games Workshop put a bit of effort into this, right? These are not just generic Warhammer40k campaign weekend. This is specific to the Tenebris system. Then once we open the pack, inside there we have a briefing sheet of the story so far. So we have this nice shiny 4-page lovely book, and within there we can see the results of the previous rounds that's been going on, the aftermath of the first round, the next chapter, and then we have a nice Tenebris system graphic on the back of the systems that we are fighting over. So that's all pretty cool, right? So it's not just turn up and randomly get drawn against your opponents. There's method in the madness. It is a story. And day 1 in the pack was the Defiance mission briefing. So there was 7 of these, depending on the game you were playing. So this was the big 3,000 point game one. This is the one I didn't play in, but this was basically just to give people a chance to play with some of their bigger toys. There was a few large Titans floating around. And the first time I've seen in the flesh, other than the Forge World store, was a full-blown Manta. It's ginormous. I've got a couple of pictures. I'll insert those into the video edit as we go along. But yeah, this had the Dark Zone special rules with the crumbling city, affecting the fly keyword and so on. But pretty much this was just a smash fest for 3,000 points. So it's kind of set up the story, right? So one of the key battles prior to the main invasion of the Dark Zones, these armies, the survivors from previous campaigns that have all mustered together and just said, let's have a big bun fight, see if we can get any kind of foothold on the planets, stubbornly fighting in deep invader territory and refusing to accept defeat. So it's just a mishmash of all the forces from the various factions having a big bun fight, pretty much just as an aside from the story, just to give people a chance to have a play with some of their bigger toy soldiers. Also within the pack, 3 lovely bits of artwork. So we have, let's show here, so we have here some Harlequins taking on some Nurgle type forces there. We've got some Imperial Guards smashing some random stuff over here. And then one specifically for Iddick Beer. We've got some nice Necron monoliths coming in against some Ultramarines. So yeah, very nice, handy little bits of artwork. And that all wrapped up the campaign pack on our arrival. So day 1 proper then, Saturday morning, mission briefing was at 10 AM. So we all trundled into the hall, army cases all packed, ready to go. And as I said, up on the big screen, that's where you sort of worked out where your opponent was going to be. So they flashed up if you were Chaos Invaders and Imperium, and then that would indicate your player number and the table to go to. And then we'd separate off then to our faction commanders, and they would give us the individual kind of briefing after the standard first aid talk, and if you're going to pass out or you need medical help and fire escapes and so on. We would then go to our faction commanders, and they would give our individual briefings, and this is where we were presented with mission number 1, which is in the dark. So again, I'll take proper pictures of these and put these up in the video so that you can have a good read through. But basically this is the Battleforged combat patrol list that we've talked about before. So with the briefings out of the way, it was time to head back to the table and get the gaming begun. What everyone was looking forward to. Getting stuck in, rolling some dice, meeting some new people and having some cool games. So I rock up at my table and my opponent is my roommate. How's that for your chances, right? So one of my fellow Stains Invaders guys, Rory, with his Adeptus Mechanicus army, which is a lovely converted and well painted force. Yeah, he's my opponent. So what's that? A 1 in a 60 chance or whatever that's going to be. Very, very weird, but that's the way it worked, right? So we both rolled up. We've actually never played each other before, so you know, if I've been playing some of my other friends that we play almost at least monthly, we might have asked for a change because we always play each other. But this time, nope, it was Rory. Never played him before. Beautiful army against my Thousand Sons Reconnoiter force, albeit with a Decimator, and then we went into the mission. So the mission, as I said, is on this bit of paper. I'm not going to read it to you, but just going to go through some of the highlights and lowlights of this mission. So we've had our first game at the Tenebris system, and weirdly enough, one of the players from my group, one of the 22, I suppose the odds are pretty much in our favour that we're going to face each other. But on top of that, the guy I'm actually sharing a room with is the guy that I got drawn with on our first game, playing a very, very pretty Adeptus Mechanicus list with a mole drill thing that came in with Electro Priests. 4x4 board, 500 point search and destroy game. And it went down to the wire, and I lost my first game by 1 point. So it was 18 victory points to the Adeptus Mechanicus and 17 to the Thousand Sons. So a close game, really good fun game. I'm glad it went to the wire. There are stories of horrible lists already emerging. One of my friends just played 9 Necron Destroyers. He's just got Space Marines, and he lost in less than 15 minutes. So he's not a very happy camper at the moment. That is Rich from the Floorhammer podcast. He's already had a word with the organisers to see if something can be done about that, because this is a campaign and not a cheese fest. But going 18-17 in my first game, very happy with that. It's a very close game. It's exactly what I'm after from an event like this. Regardless of the result, it was all about having a good time and just counting those numbers for those victory points. It was heartbreaking, but it was all part of the fun. So good game to Rory, and we roll on to game 2 very shortly. So with the initial confrontations out of the way, as our forces go into the dark zones, looking for what secrets may lie within, my forces were a little bit battered and tattered, didn't quite secure the ground they needed, and were forced out of that particular region. However, they moved swiftly into a second region and found themselves facing some orcs. And so we rolled into the second part of the patrolling system, which is Final Message. So weeks into their missions, and the teams of specialists have been broken and bloody, uncovering essential secrets about these dark zones and mysterious planet in the distance. Not likely to survive though, by the time their main forces have arrived. It's all about now gathering intelligence, passing it back to the main fleet, ready for the invading forces to arrive and take advantage of it. So we advance onto a wrecked communication compound. And would that be enough to deliver that final message? Would we get through to our forces to discover the secrets of the system? So this one, another patrol game, but we set up the board in a specific way. So this was a 4x4 board, and we had to make sure that we had a ruin or a fortification in the middle, and then place all the other terrain around it to represent this compound. Then we had one objective marker slap bang in the middle to represent sort of the control of that objective. And then we did a Dawn of War deployment, so 12 inches on either side, and then pretty much the rest of it is as a regular game, right? So you're still rolling off and doing everything as normal. First Blood, Linebreaker and Slay the Warlord don't come into effect. The mission victory conditions is all about this upload of the intelligence or sabotaging the comms, whichever you're going to go with. So each player scored 1 victory point at the end of each of their turns to control the objective. You know, the usual 3-inch thing. And then whoever has the most points at the end of it would win the game and secure the transmissions. Survival is secondary, and you must fulfill the objectives given to them by the commander. And so sudden deaths are not in play. So if you've been wiped out early on, and say you've been wiped out by turn 3, for example, this is a 5-game thing, and you're on the objective, you would score 2 more points potentially. So if the enemy was on there for 2 turns and you've got no points, but you wipe them out, you can then get 3 points and then turn the victory around. So I faced an Orc army. So let's cut to the video and see how we went with that. So game 2 at the Tenebris system has been completed, and this time the Thousand Sons faced off against a fabulously converted Orc army. Really, really impressive looking. There was like biplanes and all kinds of stuff going on. Converted or looted Tau skimmers. Really, really good game. Interesting deployments and interesting twists to the campaign as a random demon prince just materialised out of the warp trying to interfere with both players' objectives. And that was a mysteriously converted Dark Zones unit. There'll be more details on that in the video as we go through with regard to this Dark Zones campaign and these random events. However, the Tzeentch were triumphant. Yay! I won my first game. I'm a happy camper. I'm going to walk away at least with 1 victory now, which is good to know. And we're just going to head in for some lunch, and then we resume after lunch. I think we're playing our first 1750. The army list floating around. There's a mix of good stuff. There's a mix of dirty stuff, as expected. I have just seen a Belisarius call and a big nasty robot looking list floating around. I'm not looking forward to potentially drawing that one. But everything's going well so far. There have been a few cheeky games, a few nasty games, but people are being called out on it. So that is good to see, that making sure they do take the spirit of the campaign in full flow. So we're going to head into lunch, and then we'll resume back later today. Just as an aside though, I did meet Mr. Leakycheese of YouTube stardom, and met him and his kids. That was great to finally meet this guy. Been watching his videos for quite a while now. He's had some good channel growth. I'll leave all the usual links and descriptions of all the people that I've met with all their social media in the description below. But until then, let's go and get some food. So after consuming lunch then, we move into the first of the larger games. So attending our faction briefing, we have recovered intel. So our main invasion forces have arrived, but they've lost contact with those Dark Zones forces. Want to know what's happened to them, so they send down a larger force to go and find out where these guys have got to and find out what the combat patrols have discovered. So deployment was vaguely the similar as the last one, so we had to build that compound again, but in a 6x4 board, representing the forces coming down on those compounds where the last report of those combat patrol forces were. However, a campaign twist here, which is something you don't find in regular tournament play. If you won the previous game, you automatically won the right to go first, although you could still seize. However, if you both won the previous games, then it was a regular roll-off. Having won the game against the Orcs, and my opponent, a great guy by the name of Chris with a Ravenwing and Deathwing force, arrived to face me. He had been wiped out in the previous game, so I had the initiative and he did fail to steal. So, the biggest game, or the first big game of the weekend, how are my forces going to fare against the rapid, fast forces of the Ravenwing and the hard-hitting part of those Terminators and Land Raiders and Dreadnoughts of the Deathwing? Let's cut to the video, find out how we did. I faced in Game 4 a combined Ravenwing Deathwing force and managed to remove him from the board. It did take 7 turns, but that was the result, and I won the game 9 points to 3 based on the special mission that we were playing. Now I'll cover all the special missions after this report, and I'll put up all the links to how the game worked with a bunch of photos and all that. I didn't realise that my vlog video was that short actually. I was recording it in the hotel and I had to quickly get out because we were meeting up for dinner. Didn't have a chance to record it in the car park like my other ones. But yeah, Chris was a great guy. Been taking the full spirit of the weekend in hand. Turned out he had been flawed in his previous 2 games as well. The poor guy was having a bit of a rough weekend. Such is the underpowered nature of the Ravenwing and Deathwing and general Space Marines really at the moment. But it was still a fun game. There were still some real cool highlights of that game. So he had one of those Relic Contemptor Dreadnoughts at the back there. You saw in one of those photos. Unfortunately, he forgot to. He couldn't manage to attach the arms to it for some reason. I think he'd forgotten something to do that. But yeah, it had 2 twin las cannons on it, so it's not a combat one at all. Flew my Enlightened Zangors in there to try and give him a bit of a pasting. And if you've watched my tactical video on Zangor Enlightened, how much I love them and how much I think they are great at combat. They bounced off him and he basically headbutted him into the ground. This was his last remaining unit. I'd have thrown the Zangors in there thinking, yeah, this would be an easy bit of combat. He smushed them, completely wiped them out, and then his following turn took aim at the Shaman with one of those las cannons and blew him off the board as well. So he did have some really bad dice. The poor guy was rolling every 50-50 dice, failed, and that was really unfortunate because it did, although it didn't, I don't think it would have affected the outcome of the game. It did make it a little bit less enjoyable perhaps, or a little bit more one-sided than it could have been, just on dice alone. He was beating himself with dice. You know, if he needed a 4, he'd roll a 1. If he needed a 6, he'd roll a 3. It was just whatever was going wrong could go wrong, which was a little bit unfortunate. But that is the nature of the game, and that could happen to anyone. But it still didn't detract from having a good fun game, especially when we got to those closing moments. And in fact, because you can change armies between games, providing you're not tailoring once you've seen the enemy, he actually wasn't using a Chaplain Dreadnought. So he removed a couple of bikes after the game, put his Chaplain in, and then renamed that Chaplain from that Relic Contemptor as if they've moved Sarcophagus and made him a combat monster instead, which I thought really embraced the spirit of narrative campaigning, and I thought that was a great idea. You know, the guy's been promoted to Chaplain for heroism in the field. He's now a combat monster. Let's send him in and do what he could do better. He's not very good with his las cannons, so let's send him in as a combat monster. Great guy. And I've got social media links of a bunch of these guys, and I'll make sure they're all in the description below. So if you want to go and check them out on Instagram and Twitter and so on. So that wrapped up Game 4, and then we moved into our second 1750 of the day, and we moved into round 5. So with a solid victory behind me against those pesky Imperium forces, it was time to move into round 5, which is my game 4, the Wilds of Vigos. So the Imperium and Chaos forces have begun to piece together the intel discovered by their combat patrols, all pointed to a death world planet of Vigos. And each alliance dispatches its forces to that planet to root out the enemy and uncover the plans. But the very planet itself seems to be very against them. It's a death world planet. So all those previous rules, you know, with the roll of a d6 and you could the line of sight and the fly keyword and so on I mentioned earlier, has now been replaced, and we have a death world, which means that roll a d6 each time a model moves within an inch of a terrain feature while advancing or charging. On a roll of a 1, that model suffers a mortal wound. But the winning alliance from the previous turn had a bonus to pick from. So the Chaos Forces did win overall at that round 4, which meant we could choose an ambush or a scout deployment. Ambush allowed us to set up 1 infantry unit in ambush instead of placing on the battlefield, which represented basically a deep strike. But that's before the game, so actually that deep strike ambush could then move and charge and do everything else as normal. Or you could do a scout move, which means that you could, beginning of the first battle round, you can move a unit as if it was your movement phase again. So the ambush was pretty cool. I put my Zangors in there because once I looked at the battle lines, I was facing a Vostroyan infantry heavy Imperial Guard army, and he had there's a nice guy called Gary. Had over 140 infantry, 3 Baleflamer type tanks, a couple of Scout Sentinels, but it was just an awful lot of infantry to chew through. But let's see how that game panned out. Let's cut to the video. Then we moved into game 5. Game 5? Game 6? I can't remember where we are now. I've lost track of time. And this was an Imperial Guard Vostroyan army. 140 odd guardsmen. No cheese, but an awful lot of bodies to try and get through to get to the objectives. And that, in the end, turned to be a draw. We managed to get through 3 turns in the 2 hours because guardsmen. With lots of orders, 28 command points, 2 brigades. There was a lot of stuff to be doing. Managed to kill 5 of his officers, commissars, HQs, you name it. And ended up with 6 points for 2 objectives at 3 each. I had 1 objective for 3, but I had Linebreaker, Slay the Warlord, and First Blood. So it was a good draw. Wouldn't have gotten any in my favour at all had we gone beyond that. So that was one of the things. So we are now at 8:30 on the Saturday night. We've got a couple more games tomorrow with all the painting competitions and so on for the results for that. So I'm looking forward to that. But now we're just going to go get some food, and I am utterly knackered, but I'm going to have a few drinks. So see you guys in the morning. So as you heard there, managed to force or just about scrape a draw, shall we say, in that particular one. Very, very hard fought. Trying to get through that many bodies is utterly hard work. A little bit of a slower game because it is a horde army. That's just the nature of the beast. There's a lot of command points, a lot of orders to get through. The guy needs to get his army right, otherwise, you know, things don't work out. That's what the armies are designed to do. So my ambushing unit of Zangors multi-charged on turn 1. And piled their way through a whole pile of bodies, and any remaining stuff either fell away or it pulled back in the next turn, and then I faced volumes and volleys of fire, of first rank, front rank, second rank fire, and lots of mortars and so on. Some really cool stuff did happen. He had a sentinel charge right across the board, because in playing this particular game, and in fact the last one, was some secret orders. So I've got an example of one of the secret orders, if I've still got it here. No, I don't have it here. Our secret order was if you killed a character with one of your own characters in either games 4 or 5, which was this game and the previous game, that meant you counted as achieving a secret objective. And then for the forces of the Imperium, they had to have a unit in every one of the 2x2 boards at some point in the game. And if they did that, they achieved their secret objective. So there were some weird movements going on, and we didn't know what those objectives were. So he charged his sentinel right forward with some special orders, flanked around some other units and so on, and he achieved that pretty early on. But in the previous game, I'd managed to kill a couple of the characters with exalted flamers, and then some smite as well. So smite and exalted flamers, both the characters. So I managed to achieve my objectives pretty early on. But the best bit about this game was the Mutilith Vortex Beast going completely mental, getting killed and exploding all over the shop. Rolled a natural 6 for that explosion, and the resultant D6 mortal wounds killed pretty much all of his officers, multiple units, multiple squads, killed one of his Chimera chassis Bale Flamer tanks. That then exploded as well. So it just left this giant crater in the front ranks of his lines, where I just threw the Mutilith in because it was no guts, no glory, and had to send stuff in to try and get that line breaker and so on, with my flanking Zangor enlightened as well. So really funny moment of the game. It's very, very cool. A lot of dice thrown, flamer bombs coming in and trying to destroy his side ranks as well. Really cool game. Disappointing it didn't go beyond turn 3, because that might have seen a bit more of a potential favour result for him. Although you never know with those flame units, I could have started really rinsing units if he didn't manage to get rid of them. But there was still a lot of guns still to come back at me, so who knows, who knows. Favour of the dice, especially when he lost most of his officers, a lot of those orders would have started to have disappeared. So you never know. But that's the nature of the game, so it was a draw, it was 6 points apiece. And then we moved, that was pretty much the end of the day, as you saw from my little vlog entry, and then we wrapped up the day. Great day's gaming, really enjoyed it. I've met some great players, 4 really cool looking armies, complete mixed bag. Hadn't met a knight army yet, it was all good, and had 4 good games. So I cannot complain about my campaign experience on day 1. Mixed bag, so just as a summary, I won 2, drew 1 and lost 1, just as a quick summary of the day. So we now hit Sunday morning and the second day of gaming, and the first new mission of the day. We had our briefing, and this was a Tau research station. So after establishing positions on the surrounding areas, our armies begin to converge on a vast research station deep within the wilds of the Vigos system, or the Vigos planet, this magic weird death world thing. The base seems largely undefended, but energy signatures and signs of mass logistics suggest something more, and orders are given to attack right away and push into the enemy base, take it from the invaders and defeat all who do the same. So what was actually happening here was this weird missile system was now firing at all of our forces in orbit, and we had to go and neutralise it, otherwise any reinforcements and so on would not be able to come in. So this was a 1750 point game. We set up 6 objective markers representing sort of the control of this missile system, and then we deployed as we would normally for a 40k game. Now, as each of those positions represent some kind of interest or research stations within this missile system, each of those objectives was worth a various number of victory points. So a player controls the objective as would normal, within 3 inches of model. But then you rolled randomly to determine which of these research stations that you've managed to take over was worth particular points. So on a 1, it was unstable, worth 1 point, but each unit within 6 inches of that objective immediately took D3 mortal wounds. A roll of a 2 was a minor, worth 1 point. A roll of a 3 or a 4, they were moderate, so they were worth 2 points. A roll of 5 was major and worth 3 points to the player controlling it at the end of the game. And 6 was experimental, which meant it was worth 3, but you got to add 1 to any wound rolls whilst those units were in 3 inches of that controlling objective. So could be some interesting rolls with that. And as I turned up at the table, my Nemesis army appeared. My first night encounter of the weekend. Turned out to be one of the guys from my local store again. So this time I was facing Luke, and he had a Dominus class knight with the volcano cannon thing, 2 Questorist knights with the Gatling cannons, one of which was a relic, and 2 Armiger knights with the Melter fusion lance thing. So not the auto cannon versions. So this was my nemesis list. This is what I was not looking forward to. So let's crack into the vlog and see how we did. So we've just finished round 6. We have one more round to go, and this was a 1750 point list and a 1750 point game. The objective was to uncover some Tau research on this particular system. So we had 6 objectives, and they were worth anywhere between 1 and 3 points depending what you rolled for. I faced a knight list. My biggest worry of the weekend was the knight list, and this was 1 Dominus, 2 Questorus and 2 Armigers. And it went in my favour. I actually tabled the guy, another guy from my local gaming group, so one of the Staines Invaders. The Zangors ripped the Dominus in combat. So multiple buffs. So I was running prescience on them, which meant they were +1 to hit, so I was hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s because the Warlord was nearby. Buffed by 2 Mutalith powers, 1 which increased their strength, so they were wounding on 5s instead of 6s, and 1 to increase their AP, so it reduced his save down to a 5+. And then combined with Veterans of the Long War, increased the wound roll, so they were hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, and wounding on 4s with AP -2. Didn't even need to use Cycle of Slaughter for that second round of combat. 2 rounds of... Oh, in fact, I did use Cycle of Slaughter. My mistake. Yeah, it just shredded that Dominus in combat. It was rather fun to see. Serious bits of brain power trying to get all these combos to try and take down knights is not easy. And then finally, just to kill the final Armiger, he was just smited off the board. Exalted Flamers were very good. Death Hex on the rotate iron shields is amazing, so it just reduces or removes that 3+ invulnerable save, and then just poured lots of fire in it, lots of shenanigans going on there, and eventually, yep, the knights ran out of steam and they were blown off the board. The good news is, during that game, I was found out that I was in the best army nomination category. So there are 10 armies shortlisted. Competition is exceptionally tough this year. I've never seen such a well-painted set of campaign armies. Long gone are the days of primed white and dipped, or just sprayed red and said, "Yep, these are my Blood Angels," and I've just painted the lenses or whatever. Standard is exceptional. I'm not expecting to win. I'll be completely honest. The competition is so good. But to be nominated is awesome. Apparently it's one of the first Thousand Sons armies to be nominated for a long time, so I'm very happy with that. But we'll see the results of that. We get to go and vote on our favourites very shortly. We're just going to go for some lunch. But yeah, my Nemesis army, I defeated it. I was so good. I was so glad. He'd already won 5 out of 5 games. This was his first defeat of the weekend. His dice were pretty poor, sub-average dice. But it's all down to, yeah, a bit of luck, being in the right place at the right time, getting the right powers off, the right stratagems, having enough command points reserved to pull some of these tricks off, and it went in my favour. So I'm exceptionally happy. We're going to go for some lunch, and then we go into the final game and see how the storyline has panned out. Catch you guys after the next game. So the fear of the dreaded Knight army against my army was put to rest. I finally actually had something that could deal, with all-rounders really. It turns out that I'm not too bad against the massed infantry, it turns out I'm pretty good against some of those elite knights. The stars were clearly aligned. Tzeentch was looking favourably on me with some of those combinations, being in the right place, the right time, the right command points, getting the right psychic powers off. And even though I mentioned that I killed the Dominus in combat, I'd actually gone through another knight before that with pretty much the same tricks. So he managed to get a knight really close in. He full tilted a knight really early on. So one that had the big gauntlet on it, full tilted it because he wanted to take on the Mutalith Vortex Beast in combat. Got all the way down there ahead of the Dominus using the advance with his +2 for the particular household, whatever it is, +2 to the advance. Full tilt activated, charged into the Mutalith. Mutalith survived on a couple of wounds, did a couple back, nothing dramatic. And then that happened to be, I had my Zangors nearby in cover, which I was going to use the Dark Matter Crystal to teleport onto an objective sort of towards the end of the game. But as he was right in my face, I thought, you know what, my Warlord and my other Psykers were nearby, the Mutalith was right nearby. This was the time to charge into them, see what I could do. And in the following turn, I then went into the Dominus and basically did the same trick again. So, yeah, stars were aligned. Tzeentch was looking favourably down on me as these guys clambered all over these knights and stuck their Zangor blades up where the sun doesn't shine. And then we moved in as all the staff were wandering around all weekend. They're looking over people's armies, looking for those exceptionally looking armies, and there were a lot of really good armies. A couple of exceptions. There's always a couple of exceptions. You know, there are non-painters in this hobby of ours, and they just do the bare minimum, which is fine. They just want to play the game. No problems with that at all. But campaign armies does tend to draw the best in the world. Well, in the world, that's a bit of an exaggeration. Does draw the best out of people when it comes to conversions and attention to detail. And to be nominated in the top 10 out of the 120 odd people that were there was a real honour. I have been nominated several times before with different armies, so I was a little bit surprised given the competition, but did manage to get that nomination. And for that, you get one of these. So the best army nominee. So you get a nice little certificate to benefit that shortlist, and they come around and they give you a little shake of the hand and say they do check to make sure you've painted it yourself. They do always ask that question in case you've had a commission. And then I looked at what else was in the cupboard and I thought, oh my god, there's some serious competition in here. But to be nominated was a fantastic honour, to be shortlisted out of all of those players. And as I said, there were some fantastic armies in that cabinet, including 2 members of Games Workshop's own staff. So then we moved into the final game, round 7, which is called The Weapon. As the armies begin to capture the outer parts of the research station, the invader forces have sprung their traps, and a vast experimental energy weapon emerges and starts to do all kinds of nasty stuff. To represent that in the game, though, at the end of the second round of battle, you'd rolled randomly for one of the 6 tiles on your battlefield, whichever one that came up with, and units within 2d6 of the centre of that section suffered mortal wounds, as you know, bits of spaceship were being blown out of the sky and landing on the battlefield. Characters were more likely to be able to jump out the way, but everyone else suffered D3 mortal wounds. And you couldn't command reroll that either. But if you controlled more objectives than your opponent, you got to adjust the dice a little bit. So if it landed on your side, you could reduce that range of damage. So you had a little bit of a chance to try and dodge some of it out if you were controlling more objectives. Again, standard deployments again, but with 3 objectives, which had to be pretty much within 3 inches of the centre of the board. So it was Dawn of War, but basically you had to advance into that middle position to take the weapon command nodes. So I looked at my opponent's forces, and yeah, Tzeentch might have been smiling on me in the previous round, but then the fickle nature of the Chaos Gods decided to raid. And I was facing a Demon Hunter Inquisition force. Yeah, a Demon Hunter Inquisition force. My army is 90% Demon keyword, which basically means with the benefits of their force winning the previous round as well, he was re-rolling to hit, re-rolling to wound, ignoring most of my invulnerable saves, and yeah, a full assassin force, scions, rogue traders, greyfax, lots of Inquisition stuff, and a boatload of Sisters of Battle. So I was doing not a lot of psychic. Most of his army actually deep struck, all his scions deep struck. he hid all his other forces very carefully in a little box at the start of the game. Nothing happened till turn 3 because I couldn't do anything to him because he was hidden, and he couldn't do anything to me because he was waiting for his reserves to arrive. His reserves all arrived. Melter guns blew the Forge Fiend away. Something else blew the Mutilith away. All the assassins compiled in. The Vindicare killed all my characters. And at the end of that turn, I had an Exalted Flamer, my other Flamers which hadn't arrived yet, and I think I had a Sorcerer on a wound at the end of turn 3. GG's. But that's the nature of the game, right? So the rock to my scissors arrived. You know, there wasn't that many, you know, Tzeentch demon type armies about. I think there was 2 of us that were playing Thousand Suns, a couple of other demon forces, but we're not in great number. And yeah, and his kind of eyes lit up, I guess, as he saw what I was fielding, and basically negates all of my special abilities. So an interesting game, not really a big challenge for him. He just basically wiped the floor with me, and that was that. So. Yeah, the fickle nature of the Chaos Gods. It was still a good game, still a fun game, but it was only ever going to go one way. So unfortunate matchup. You know, had he met a Knight Army or something like that, maybe he would have had a bit of a struggle. I don't know what the rest of this guy's results were, but against me, yeah, he just chewed me off the board. So it was a bit of a flat ending, really, shall we say, to the event. But you know what? That's the luck of the draw. That's the nature of the beast. You win some, you lose some. The 3 games that I did win, I did wipe the floor with all 3 of them, and tabled all 3. And then I had a really close loss. Then that one was just a whitewash. That is, as I said, the rock to my scissors. So that's just the nature of the game. So no problems at all with it. They were still good fun opponents. Had all my games were really good opponents, all really good painted armies, very thematic, and you did feel like you were playing with them rather than against them. So it was. For me, a great ending to the campaign. Then we moved into the award ceremonies, and between our mob from Staines, we had 3 of us in for the top 10 for the army list, which wasn't a bad gang. None of us won it. Very beautifully converted Emperor's Children army, I believe, won it, which was really nice. So fair play to the guy for winning that. One of my buddies won the best vehicle. Another one won Best Squad with his converted Necron Destroyers. The best vehicle was a converted Nurgle Demon Knight, which was really cool. We also had Most Sporting Player amongst us as well. And we've got 22 of us split across all the forces. So the forces of the Imperium held out and actually won the event in the end. So most of us walked away with something from the weekend. So it was a good showing. And then we took the obligatory Ultramarine Rhino photo at the end, and then we departed our ways. So, in summary then, for the whole weekend, how good was it? Was it worth the £65? Was it worth the trip? Absolutely it was. I've loved going to campaigns. I've been doing campaigns for 15 to 20 years at Warhammerworld and various other places. I used to run a couple myself, or has helped run a few of them before the Warhammer team sort of firmly took charge and did that themselves. Been going for a long time, so I do love these kind of events. I was a bit concerned, with the popularity of 8th edition these days, that a lot of people that are more competitive in nature, who can't get tickets for the GT but want to go to Warhammer World, will then spill over into these kind of events. Those kind of players did appear. Those kind of players were kind of warned a little bit to say, you know what, this isn't what you think it is, right? Don't bring your dirty list to something like this. Have a reason to be here and enjoy it playing with, not against. That's the big difference between a tournament and a campaign. So one of the other awards that was available was the Lore Master. This is someone who takes the spirit and the campaign to heart a little bit. So they're a bit more involved. So I actually created this. So you can see this beautifully tea-weathered lore of my Tzeentch forces. So from the opening paragraphs here, it's a bit crinkly and crumply because it's old and battered. Here's the background to my army. I had 2 exalted sorcerers in my list, and the idea was I had 2 rival sorcerers, one who favoured the demon side of things and one who favoured the rubric and Zangor side of things. So I've kind of split my army in half that way. So anything with the with the demon thing, so the big Mutilith, the Forge Fiend, and the actual demon allies. They came along sort of on one half of my 2 rival sorcerers, and the other one had all the rubrics and the Zangors and that kind of thing going on. So that was kind of the story. I put my army lists in the back of it as well, just for good measure. This didn't win. There was a guy in full cosplay, Cornate Demon style, giving rousing speeches at the start of every battle round. He had, you know, his horns going on, big capes. He had a big corn broom handle going on as well. He was in full character. He seemed like a good laugh, and he won it as himself, taking on the full mantra, or the mantra's the right word, isn't it? Mantle, whatever the word is, of the chaos embodiment, and yeah, he won it for his cosplaying and oration skills during the event. So fair play to that guy. So it's just a nice little bonus thing. Not very many people went in for that kind of stuff, but for me, that's sort of that little bit of extra attention to detail for going in for these events. But what I'll do now is I'll just put the photos up from that last round. I'll also add photos of all those mission briefings, so if you want to take copies of those and pause and screen grab and read those through, you can do. Highly recommend it. Maybe take it to your local gaming club and use those as well. A few other sort of special rules that crept in as well. There's another bit of paper I've got down here from the weekend. So there was a couple of Chaos secret objectives. I mentioned having to kill characters. If you achieved your secret objective, in the final game, you had a choice of 10 different bonuses that you could apply to your army. One of which you could turn a character into a spawn. You could add 6 inches to the range of characters' weapons, 3 inches to a character's move, 1 to his strength. So it's basically the boon table really from the Chaos abilities here, and there's a couple missing, but one you could, if you had a demon prince, you could convert one guy into a demon. So things like that just sort of add a little bit of variety to the game. You know, competitive players will see that completely unfair and unbalanced, and I can understand that, but from a narrative perspective, this kind of stuff is good fun, and if you want to play that within your community, within your gaming groups, I highly recommend it. But as I said, I'll put the remaining photos up, put a little bit of music on, and if you did enjoy this video, enjoy this quite long-winded talk through of a campaign event, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.